pull out my phone.
You have a number?
I have it.
Okay, cool.
In half an hour.
Well, thank you.
Okay, bonjour et bienvenue tout le monde. On behalf of all of us behind the scenes here at Fourth Space, welcome everyone in person or via Zoom, and thank you for joining us. We are coming to you live from Concordia University's Fourth Space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And as caretakers for the lands and waters that we are meeting on, we are grateful to the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation for their teachings about the earth and our relations. At Fourth Space, we work to connect people to the initiatives, research projects, and dialogues, conversations happening across the university. So we are pleased to have the opportunity to collaborate with our colleagues in the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies in Society and Culture to welcome all of you into our virtual and physical space for the fourth in a series of conversations on community health, today focused on lived experiences of the body and practices of care. I'll pass it over to CISC Director Mark Sussman in a sec to get you situated. Just before doing so, I'll mention that this meeting is being moderated today by Lisa Njuru, who is here with us, and that we are in a meeting format. So those of you joining this meeting for the first time, this of course means that A, you can set your own view, and B, a raised hand, a raised virtual hand, and activating your video is really a great visual cue for us to be able to call upon you throughout this community consultation. So don't be shy about popping in. Otherwise, the chat is open for comments as well, and we'll be paying attention to that space. Finally, we are live streaming to YouTube. I'll pop that into the chat now. That's it for me. Over to you, Mark. Hello.
Thank you, Anna, once again for welcoming us to Fourth Space. I'm Mark Sussman, the director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies in Society and Culture, and this is the fourth in our series of conversations on community health, which we've been planning and holding this winter term at Concordia. As I'm sure you know, these conversations are about speculating, imagining, investigating, and learning from each other about research that's either in progress or that's imagined for the future on community health in the context of Concordia's initiative launching a new School of Health. And the new School of Health will have as one of its three hubs a community health hub that will be an umbrella for various forms of research and will also launch curricular and other initiatives. And we're really looking for people's ideas and suggestions for what kinds of initiatives we might try in the coming year, from speaker series or roundtables. And we're also looking to think about how to meaningfully have community health taught and studied at Concordia in a way that supports communities very directly. So we have an expert in that field moderating today's discussion, and it may well be a conversation among the three of us at this table. We'll see who else joins us today. But I'm very happy that Lisa Njuru is with us. She is, I'll give her a formal introduction. She is a Provost Postdoctoral Fellow at the Faculty of Information of the University of Toronto. Her newest project, Waking the Stories, explores wellness, pre-colonial oral tradition, storytelling, knowledge creation and transmission, Afrotopias and other future imaginaries, identities, and research creation. She holds a PhD from Concordia and a psychotherapy permit through the Ordre des Psychologues du Québec, with certificates in Moreno psychodrama and third-party neutral conflict resolution. She's a skilled practitioner of playback theater and co-founded the Montreal-based Living Histories Ensemble. Born in Rwanda, she has served the Rwandan diaspora in North America for more than 20 years as an organizer, researcher, and activist. Her extensive experimentation with storytelling, play, and improvised theater aims for individual and collective meaning-making and empowerment in the aftermath of large-scale political violence. And I'll also add that Lisa was a member of the President's Task Force on Anti-Black Racism here at Concordia a few years ago. So I will just say a few words and then turn it over to Lisa to maybe just frame some thoughts for us to get going. I'm also very happy that Kate Stearns is with us here at the table and from the Department of English, a professor in creative writing, and someone who has been quite a loyal participant in these meetings and has a background as a teacher and researcher in the field of narrative medicine, which is something that has been, it's come up in all of our discussions, and it's something we want to keep at the heart of what the Community Health Hub might do and might be. So I'm glad that Kate will join us in the discussion as well. So maybe I will turn it over to Lisa. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm so glad we're here together in this beautiful space. It's always a very, something transformative about walking into the fourth space and having a conversation. It feels like a little bit heightened, but not in a very warm and supportive way. So.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit enclosed by a screen, so we see you a little bit. We see a few squares of you on the screen, but it also sort of cuts us off from the larger room. So we're in a small, and we're out a little bit outside, a little bit inside. It's very nice. Yeah.
So part of the role of these meetings is to think about what may be, what looks to be quite a significant step for Concordia in starting a new school, a school that will have a dean who will arrive presumably later this summer, and 3 directors of 3 research and curricular hubs. What has been discussed is potential for interdisciplinary PhD programs, not unlike the humanities and indie programs in structure, but perhaps with more focus on scientific aspects of health, biology and physical science, exercise science, and then community health initiatives. And what we're looking for are ideas and thoughts of how does a large university, a downtown urban university, take the first steps in studying and doing meaningful community health research in a way that's ethical, meaningful, that has an effect, and that isn't, how can I say, that's in line with our ambitions and our abilities as a university. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. Oh, yes. Oh, and there are people on Zoom. Sorry, we don't see you on the screen. So Anna's alerting us, so that's great. So those of you who have joined us on Zoom, we will ask you to introduce yourselves when you feel like you'd like to join the conversation. So what I'll do is turn it over to Lisa first to say a few words, and then we will keep our eyes peeled for your raised hands. And my apologies, the screen in front of me didn't register everybody who in fact is here with us on Zoom. So welcome, great to have you. So I'll turn it over to Lisa to maybe respond a little bit, and then we'll look for your interventions. Thanks.
So thank you for having me, for inviting me to be a part of this. It's a very, very exciting time. I find we at Concordia have, we at Concordia, we have we come out of a tradition, right? Like the 2 colleges that formed Concordia were close to people and concerns of people in the community. So I think that the tradition is there. There have been so many different research projects over the years that have been, sorry, that have been working with community, and so the community wellness. There's a whole department, right? Applied Human Sciences is a whole department where wellness is wellness and change is the order of the day all the time, right? We have a department of clinical psychology. It's not as though we have a very, very involved reform center. We have the gym that is over there. So it's not as though we didn't have any, how could I say, that we didn't have any work going in those. I think it's a moment where it maybe becomes more explicit, more focused, more of us gathering around, especially like with the intention of working for wellness. And I'm wondering always, I mean, I was raised here at Concordia in a community university research alliance project, the Montreal Life Stories project, and it was a project that gave tremendous value to the communities that were a part of it. And so my question for all of us is, how do we think of research that serves our communities, that gives value? How do we give value to the people that we learn with and from? And how do we take advantage of there's a lot of, we might not feel like it when we're on the inside, we might feel difficulties or scarcity, but in comparison with the community existence, there is, like, I'm thinking of a certain kind of community. Obviously, not all communities are less funded, but I think that there is something, the institution has something of stability. And how do we take advantage of the stability and the longevity of the university to take risks, and I say this, ethical risks, right? Experimenting with things that maybe outside we won't be able to, because there's this need for, how do you say that? This need for results, right? How do we do research with people, for people, as humans? Yeah. Bon.
Can you give an example of
what I'm thinking
what
about?
a risky research?
Well, I mean, yeah, but what I mean by risk is that I think that everybody is aware of the how can I say it? The benefits and the limitations of, for example, ethics board, right? Like boards of ethics, that is incredibly important and incredibly interesting. And also, sometimes there are things, I find that, okay, I'll start over my sentence, I'm sorry, I'm going into two different directions.
That's okay.
The idea, what I'm thinking about specifically is, for example, if you're working with difficult stories, for example, if we're working, my field is mental health, is post sort of violence, meaning making. There's an a priori, that people are more fragile maybe than they are, because they carry these stories all the time. And sometimes it is, I don't know if we can learn without risking failure. Like, I don't think that we can learn without failure necessarily. And so how do we make sure that we take that we take advantage of the possibility of experimenting, not experimenting in a way where you're experimenting on someone, like, you know, electroshocks to Sala. I'm thinking about if we are trying something out, that we are not necessarily immediately thinking about the legal implications of if somebody is going to get sued. You know?
Maybe one thing we should be thinking about, which you mentioned, which really perked my ears up, is to redefine the idea of results, right? What are we looking for? And in university, of course, results are, well, you know, it's grades or it's research or it's funding, but maybe those results, or the results in the context of what a community health hub can provide, may need to be redefined. That the results may not be immediate, or they may not fit in with the rubric of a university as we normally consider it, but that maybe that's where the experimentation, as much as anything else, can take place. What are we actually looking to provide? What are we looking to learn? How are we going to disseminate the information? So in terms of the results that we are usually comfortable with, maybe that's where we should also be rethinking.
And like, what is valuable knowledge, and for whom?
I see one hand raised, so maybe I'll ask Christina. Hi. Would you maybe just introduce yourself and say a word or two about your work and your research, and add to the conversation or pose a question? Nice, thanks.
Sorry, I got really excited. I was like, I want to join, but I'm not there in person. So I'll take a few seconds to introduce myself. My name is Christina Foisy. I recently finished my PhD at York University in health humanities. Thank you. Oh, it was a year ago, but I feel like it was still soon and not that long ago. So in critical health humanities, MAD studies, and sound studies. So I work a lot with relational listening, ethical listening to stories of distress. In particular, I was working with women who undergone electroshock therapy, electroconvulsive therapy, non-consenting, and the coerciveness of psychiatric listening, and really trying to think through listening not as a diagnostic listening, but listening as a dialogical, ethical opportunity and possibility. I won't go on about it, but it's called Sounding Madness. And anyway, and I'm also a person with lived experience. So I have lived experience within the psychiatric system as a service user, and I've been politicized, right, from that experience. And so and I'm now employed within the Center for Addiction and Mental Health within Toronto. And I'm working in community engagement with psychiatric survivors, but also service users of the mental health system. And it was interesting. I just came from a talk where I led a workshop with, ministry folks, people within these institutions who are doing patient engagement. So patient engagement, family engagement, it is super trendy right now. Everyone wants to be doing it. And I think two things that I think of is one, that this work started way before institutions were interested in it. Yeah. So from the community, from the activism, from the kind of the labor of those that were ready to kind of critique the status quo and critique systems of power from outside institutions. And so I spent a lot of time honoring and listening to the work that has come before me, and the people that have come before me, and also looking at kind of the intersectionality between different organizing bodies, right? So the MAD movement and other liberation movements also kind of come together, and they don't all agree, right? And it's not all this kind of like, unifying like people with lived experience, who are they, and, et cetera. But the other piece too is that we find a lot of this kind of, when it's institutional led engagement work, sometimes there is this risk. So there's a risk, and like, we need to take risk. We need to be flexible. We need to be really to bend the rules and think through like, well, how are we actually, is this a mutually beneficial relationship? What are we giving back? So if we have resources, how are we investing in the communities that we're seeking to work with? Are we paying people for their time? Are we giving back to organizing organizations that are often underfunded and can't compete with universities and research grants, et cetera. I have a background. I used to work at Hen Hands, which is a community I'm from Montreal, so I'm an alumni from Concordia, and I spent a lot of time working in community organizing and like being like, we have no money to do anything. So it's like, how are we finding that kind of partnership, that collaborative partnership where it's like we're all consenting on the work and who's going to do what, and also like if you have more money than others, then how are you redistributing that money and making sure that everyone can participate equitably. And then the other part is like what I find oftentimes in my role is this kind of posturing of like bringing in the stories, but they're commodified and they're used to kind of sell an idea or something that the institution can like congratulate themselves for, right? So there's this kind of tokenistic, appropriating risk involved, and that could be harmful when those who are participating in this engagement don't have a say in what the final product looks like or how their stories will be used. So I think there's this like push towards data sovereignty and really ensuring that folks who are being brought in have power, right? So it's not power over, it's power with, it's sharing. So I think in a lot of ways, engagement, thinking through it also around like the results, what was raised earlier, I also think a lot about how, for me, there's like this process of relationship building that is not necessarily about metrics. It's about how much are you like, what is the time that you're spending in communities? How are you giving back? Like, so for instance, like when I work with sex survivors, I like volunteered for 4 years at the Psychiatric Survivor Archives of Toronto before doing any research, right? So I built relationships with people on a like human level before being like, hi, everybody, I want to come and like do work with you, like in this very kind of artificial way. And I think oftentimes we don't think about the time that it takes to build these relationships. And there's this kind of impetus to just go, go, go. And failure, I mean, I would say that like it's how to fail well and like to learn from what you perhaps didn't, think of at first. But I often think like it's okay I think there's also like, I know where I work, there's like the stress of like, oh, we don't want to get it wrong, so we're not going to do it at all. So I think there's like a balance there to take risks, but to do it in an ethical way, right? So to make sure that you're kind of reflecting on, is this engagement what we need to be doing right now? In terms of like, I find there's often like advisory panels or bringing people to like join these like preset groups, or what are other ways that we can engage that are not institutional based only, right? That are, more creative or, anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, you offered so much, Christina. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I really want to thank you for introducing, among many of the things you said, the idea of building a community, or building community relations slowly, and really like having researchers or groups of researchers slowly get to know groups they may want to work with and serve and be served by or with, and figure out sort of together what projects are going to look like, as opposed to swooping in as the institution with a brand and deciding that something's going to happen for a couple of years and then move on. I mean, that to me is the worst model we could think of. So I really appreciate highlighting that patient and community engagement. Lisa referenced the research ethics infrastructures at Concordia, which are pretty strong, and I think there are I think pretty good habits of working carefully with research partners at the university, but that always needs to be rethought and critiqued and rethought again. So yeah, thanks.
I liked also this idea of what can we do versus we can't do it all, right? Like maybe we can't do it all, but what can we do, and doing that, right? And I like this idea of the question of how are we investing in the communities we work with. I think that those are really the questions that I also hold, and that are, yeah, that I think that if we are permeated with those questions in the School of Health, we're going to do fine. Especially, I think that if we think of ourselves as living within the community, we are part of the community. And so if we are part of the community and we are there for a while, then what are the relationships we want to have with our neighbors, with our people? This is our people, right? Yeah.
I see Cynthia, who I'm glad to see is joining us. Cynthia Bruce, do you want to say a word about your work and
Sure.
join
So
the
I am an assistant professor in creative arts therapy. So I'm a music therapist and a critical disability studies scholar. So really great to hear about your work, Christina. And I so resonate with the notion of just finishing a PhD, and mine was 5 years ago. So I still feel like it's just done some days. My work really focuses, and I guess, in two key areas. I certainly look at accessibility broadly in higher education,
Cynthia,
and then
I don't hear you very well.
no.
Why? No, I don't know why. I don't. Go ahead. Try again.
Okay, that's really strange. Is that any better?
Yeah.
a little bit?
Okay, I'll just speak up because I don't have any idea how to change settings. Okay.
Perfect.
So I work primarily in accessibility in higher education, but then I also sort of look at accessibility within health professions, and particularly within the creative arts therapies. But I wanted to pick up on two strands, one from Lisa and one from Christina. I worry a lot in a profession like music therapy that's constantly arguing for its value in healthcare settings, that we really do co-opt people's stories in order to kind of prove our own worth. And I worry about that in a lot of ways, because I think it really is, dangerously perpetuating ableist frameworks of folks with disabilities. And, I think that we don't do it in relationship very well. I think it's not a relationship that we attend to very well. And to think about, how do we come together as community and in reciprocal relationships to both advance the value of disabled lives, but also the ways that music therapy and the creative arts therapies can support us to live those good lives. So it was one strand I wanted to pick up on. And I think the other thing was related to the research ethics boards, because while I think we have great procedures in place at Concordia that are really very careful, I wonder and I worry about the ways that sometimes it risks silencing the voices of some marginalized folks because of a level of presumed incompetence that we have to guard against. And I think there are particular groups that are quite vulnerable to that. So for sure, intellectual disability labels, we really see them as very vulnerable and incapable of consent quite often. And so we put a lot of procedures in place that I think might stop people from doing work because it's so difficult to get ethical approval. And I think that silences voices that are already so pervasively silenced. So I like the notion of really thinking carefully about how we work in community in sort of genuine reciprocity, to bring people's voices to the center that are still sitting on the margins every day, even though we really claim to do work that supports them to live well.
And can I ask, Cynthia, can you give maybe even just an anecdotal example of what you would call genuine reciprocity, or a project, or even a moment of a project Maybe sort of dramatize that?
So I have a colleague whose work I love, Patty Douglas, who works in critical disability studies and critical autism studies, and she's doing the Restoring Autism project so that it's, a genuine reciprocal partnership where they come together using photo, voice, and video to really support people to tell their own stories. I think the kind of reciprocity I'm looking for is the kind of ways that maybe creative arts therapists and the disability community can come together to really engage in a discussion about how we can ethically promote the value of our profession, so that we're not saying our profession is really valuable because we can support these people to overcome their horrible circumstances in life. And I think we need a much more reciprocal process and engagement in order to make, I think, more ethical claims about the value of our work sometimes. I don't know if that is what you're looking for.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that is really, really important. There's also, and I think that came from, it ties one of the strands of what you said, Cynthia, with something that is going on in the chat that I saw pop up. I think it was Gilbert who talked about it, and it got taken up again about how academic frameworks are not necessarily, what does it say? Are not necessarily conducive, right, to that kind of because there is I'm imagining, I don't know if that's what you were thinking, but this idea of there's a pressure to produce. There are timelines and that make it so. And so, how do we I was going to say subvert that. Ali, how do
I might say subvert.
how do we then work? We're also smart. How do we do it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think we talked earlier about thinking about the outputs that are required, but I wonder also about, as I think of applying for research grants, as I'm applying for them, I'm thinking they're asking me for a 1-year project, and that's not enough time.
Yeah.
Right, for me to really engage respectfully with folks that are part of my community. I mean, I am a blind activist researcher. This is my community, and it's still not enough time for me, I don't think, to engage respectfully and in reciprocity.
It's interesting. What I feel like we're partly speaking about here, and I'm referencing also what's happening in the chat, a few comments from Gilbert and Victoria around questions of kind of awful phrase, but academic performance, or even worse phrase, the notion of quote unquote outputs, research outputs, milestones, or objects that must be produced on a timeline. And there are real differences in timing and expectations across the different sectors of the university, right? The humanities and the arts, and not to lump them together even, but they have their kind of habits and methods of expecting and looking at exhibition, performance, publication, etc. And maybe the sciences, the business school, the engineering school, where there's maybe a different rhythm, a different set of expectations. Similarly in the social sciences, maybe somewhere in between. So the question of where community health will fall and what its temporalities will be around academic work seems to me very much in the air of what we're discussing here. And reciprocity and ethical work happens on a very different timeline, partly because the work should and will wants to value those who are not employed by the university, who are, in some sense, telling us what the projects need to be.
Yeah, so I do think that's, and I know you want to go into others, but I think what's really exciting when I think about a community health hub is the opportunity it gives Concordia to lead in all of these areas that we have identified as restrictive and problematic. I mean, it's a real opportunity to lead.
I'm clapping, Cynthia.
Great.
I would completely agree with that. And actually, I think there are a lot of people, I mean, for example, in creative writing and, the art, sort of humanities and artistic field, who feel the timelines that the university imposes are actually really destructive. And so I would argue that this is an opportunity for us, if we're going to build something from the ground up, to say we can't sort of follow that timeline. For
Yeah.
The outcomes here are different. The amount of energy and time put into it is different. We need to argue for a new rubric, I think.
Yeah, which is in itself subversive, right? It is disruptive, and that's probably really important.
And I guess I just want to say this may be and I see another hand. Oh, Heather, in 1 second. I think this may be something we say to each other as in our departments, as colleagues. Maybe we say in our own running monologues as we answer emails and keep up with administrative work. But it's important to say it out loud in a forum like this, and it will be incorporated into a report that we draw up, that it's going to be circulated among the folks starting the School of Health and calling for it to come into existence. So I think I'm very grateful that this is being said out loud here, so that we can amplify it and frame it and say what we mean about what this kind of work is going to demand if it's going to be serious. But Heather, do you want to jump in? So I'm looking up there because we see you on the screen. But
we see you there.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, hi, nice to see you folks again, and hi, Cynthia. I'm Heather McLaughlin from Creative Arts Therapies as well as Cynthia. I'm an art therapist, also a couple and family therapist and a psychotherapist, and I'm directing our department's new Arts and Health Center, which I spoke a bit about the last time. And so
Speak louder, I think, because I think it's the space here that does it. Because on the chat it says that you're all, like it said before, that for you it's fine, but for us we hear very faintly.
Can't hear so well. And I know my voice goes to white noise very quickly for some people. I'll try and speak up, hopefully, and I have a microphone I'll direct. I don't know, can you hear me any better, Lisa? Okay, so I guess we're in the process of developing this new center that will be serving the community, and our students will be having an internship there that connects with different areas of the community to bring creative arts therapies. And rather than elaborating on that, I'm going to sort of take a couple of the ideas that have come up that I think are ones that we've been really thinking about, and just really want to highlight and sort of expand what other people have been saying on those points. And so I'm going to start with the one about time, because time is something I've been thinking a lot about. First off, as a psychotherapist, time is something that became sort of quite politicized in our work as psychotherapy offered within public health settings were determined not to be something that it was worth investing in over time. That's a whole complicated story, and I want to be delicate and respectful of the different models and some of the values of thinking about things being able to happen quickly. However, moving towards more short-term models of psychotherapy has had all kinds of other repercussions as far as how long does it stick, who does it serve, how does it help, and a particular concern to me of how it can risk sometimes devaluing the importance of the relationship, and that building trusting relationships and meaningful relationships really need time. And I think that that the valuing of that is something that is so critical when we think about health, that relating and relationship and listening and understanding are such a critical part of whatever mode we are using to try and consider health. And so thinking about time as far as how it relates to relationship, thinking about how it also relates to sustainability. I think we could look at that from a lot of angles, but what I think about so much is sort of, I don't know, we'll call it capitalist or neoliberalism, or all of the different power structures that lead to some sort of a need for speed, and thinking that speed equals value somehow, and not recognizing all that gets lost in the speediness, all the different resources and the costs, the ways that we can't consider things deeply, the ways that people and resources get exhausted, and that sort of functioning also doesn't give space for reflection and thinking about longer term time. When we're going quickly, we tend then to only think about what's directly in front of us because we don't have enough time to process in bigger and longer term and broader ways. And so we risk creating all sorts of problems that we don't foresee because we are not really contemplating it in the most effective way. And so we lose effectiveness at the benefit of speed. And then also how it ties into all of both of those also can tie into sort of thinking about justice and social justice. If we're depleting all of the resources, that inevitably leads to ways that justice is compromised. And I think we could take that down many angles. So I'm going to highlight the time part, and I also want to just call out the part, Lisa, that you were talking about risk and being able to have some room for error and how important that is in the learning. I think about that too, that there's so much we end up avoiding for fear of the outcomes, and certainly there are certain outcomes that we do need to be particularly conscious about when we are considering health and all of our ethical responsibilities. So it's not without keeping those in mind, but if we don't have ways to really play with ideas and try out different things and be able to fail, we don't have the opportunity to potentially innovate and come up with something new. And it's such an important part of any creative process to be able to have safety enough that we can take the risks. And so what goes into creating that, and then where are the limits of that, or something to consider. But the importance of there being room for that is really critical. Thank you.
I love what you said. It's funny, when you were thinking about, when I heard speed, I was thinking, that is interesting. I never thought about it as the value of speed. I've always thought about it in terms of like the end of rationality, like optimizing. And then, but when you said that speed thing, I was thinking, oh, so what is the advantage of putting everybody into this speed thing? It made me think of high heels. You know how, I mean, I can't wear them anymore, but I love them. But I mean, that the way in which high heels make it impossible for someone to really sprint off if they need to, type thing. So yes. I thought that was a funny image that came up. So yeah, why do we concede to this fragilisation, or in what ways do we, and how can we resist? How can we push back a little? How can we get Birkenstocks?
They don't work for me, I have to say.
Yeah,
they're supposed to be comfortable, but they're not.
Sorry, never mind.
But I also like the idea of playing with ideas, and I think this has sort of come up quite frequently. The luxury, if we're talking about time as well, of being able to put forth ideas that don't have an immediate goal, perhaps. That some ideas do need to percolate, and actually some ideas need to percolate with different kinds of people before a project is outlined. So that to have a space for that kind of interplay, that kind of play, as it were, intellectual play, I think would be a really useful and wonderful aspect to a community health hub. Like that.
I see Martin and then Christina once more. Martin, do you want to introduce yourself for a minute?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Great to see you. Thank you so much, Mark and Lisa, for moderating this discussion, and another great discussion. And I've been really inspired by, these points that we've been revolving around. Lisa, this great way you framed it for us about ethics risk, and Christina getting us to think about, among many things, paying people for, economic justice issues, the importance of appropriately distributing the resources that that the School of Health might be able to get eventually. And Cynthia's amazing points. Anyway, everyone's made amazing points, and I was just thinking, I wonder if one of the, maybe I should introduce myself as well. My name is Martin French, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. And I do work on risk and surveillance, and a lot of thinking around public health surveillance and various kinds of risks. For example, working on a project that looks at how public health data collected through different processes of HIV surveillance gets implicated in different forms of stigma, discrimination, and even at the sharp end of the spectrum, HIV criminalization. I spend a lot of time when I'm working on that thinking about how to work with the community and what the ethics, what the ethics are, what my own personal ethics are when working with different communities, what my moral obligations are to myself and my fellow community members, and what the constraints, I guess, the ways that our ethics governance frameworks enable and constrain certain kinds of relationships. And these great points that Lisa, you made about taking ethics risks here in this space, I think are so vital. And then again, Christina's points, Cynthia's points, Heather's points. Building on all of this, I'm wondering if there is a role for the School of Health, since it's not, it's not going to be and cannot be, because it's not going to be a medical school, a traditional kind of school with an approach to research ethics governed by kind of like biomedical ethics. Maybe there's a chance to intervene, to develop some capacity within the school and within the community health hub to be able to not just kind of like intervene with our own organizations and create conditions for intervening with our the communities that we work with, but for intervening at the level of policy development with respect to the Tri-Council, on precisely these points about, the decisions that funding agencies make. I found, for example, some real challenges getting people even just listed as collaborators on my SSHRC-funded project because of various kinds of, I know they've been trying to work to make the process more accessible, but I think there's still a lot of work that we need to do to make the process more accessible. So intervening at the level of the Tri-Council to help to move the debate about what research ethics is and what it might be. I think this could be a great role for our community health hub and the School of Health. I've just been inspired by what people have said today, so thank you. And I unfortunately have to leave and at 3 o'clock, so I have to drop off of the discussion. So I wanted to get my point in. Thank you, everybody.
I just wanted to thank you because you're saying this really, really important thing. And if we were a bit distracted there, it's because there's a skateboarder that is going around, and then it resonates in the metal. So we're like every time. So, but we heard this really important piece around intervention with the Tri-Council and the sort of the status of the different people. How can we make sure that that there are some changes there that could be imagined, or at least start these I mean, these are not, I can't imagine that the conversations that are started, because this has been going on for like, yeah, over a decade. I was at the Montreal Life Story is finished in 2012, so a decade ago, and we had those in the beginning of the, like it's been going on forever. So there must be an ongoing conversation going on already, and can we be a part of that and push that agenda, right? Yeah, I think that's important.
Christina was up next. I thought maybe after Christina speaks, I just wanted to invite Rosa, who contributed in the chat as well. Maybe if you wanted to amplify your comment and your suggestion and your offering of that resource, that might be great. But Christina, why don't you, if you're willing, Christina, why don't we go to you next?
All right, sure. I forgot to unmute myself. So Martin and Heather, I wanted to thank you so much for your points. And it made me think about the need for engagement at multiple levels of power. So we have the macro level. So that's where you have funding, the funders. So the Tri-Council, those who are making decisions about how money is distributed and who are we engaging, and who, I often think that the CIHR grants around, they want patient researchers, and they're often in these really kind of, I hate to use the word, but gross like language, and they're really limiting. I remember being asked like if I wanted to be a patient researcher, and I was like, hell no, I have a PhD, like I'm a thinker, I'm contributing like epistemological like value here. I am not this like, you know what I mean? Like, so there's we need to advocate at that level. I'm like, can we organize and write some letters and like I'm always thinking about what can I do within my role to say thank you, but no thank you, and to resist when I can. So to really, if you guys have the opportunity to really think about the macro level, so the funding agency legislation, these structures, the meso level, so the organization itself, so the hub itself, what are the HR policies that you have? Like, do you require certain levels of education? Do you have equivalencies around, advocacy expertise or lived experience expertise, and you're valuing that at the kind of on an equitable level? Because oftentimes we say we value lived experience of various forms of oppression, but that's really just a nice to have. It's not central to the role. We're not seeing it as a form of analysis. We're seeing as just this kind of identity category, right? So that's problematic. And those are things that you can shift within, how you're hiring people, how you're bringing people in to the hub, and also at the micro level. So that would be in your interpersonal dynamics, in relationships at that kind of interpersonal level. And then going back to the speed and that those kind of constraints, like the talk I was just coming out, the workshop that I was leading was with Ontario Health and for the Ontario Structured Psychotherapy Program. So I have lots to say about the CBT rollout of that, and like the focus on this kind of structured psychotherapy. So it's quick, it's efficient. It's all about like equity being framed as efficiency, right? So it saves us time, it saves us money. It's the neoliberal way. And look, we're helping we're getting all the low hanging fruit, from so it has this. So how do you critique that? How do you stand up and say, okay, how do we mitigate? So what we're doing a lot of times in that program is we're pushing back between like, so we're going to spend more time in the phone interviews when clients come in, and advocate for like the need for that time, but it's like it's really slow, and oftentimes that's brought in through because we've done consultations with folks who've said, hey, this doesn't work for us, or this is not helpful. But all that to say is that there's this kind of equity and speed and urgency kind of don't go hand in hand, right? Like you need to slow down and also say like it's urgent, it's important, not to say it's not important, but that it will not be as, how can I say, high quality if it's rushed and just kind of pushed through and you're just looking at numbers, like how many people came to our event and yay, that's, you know, but like, did they actually get anything out of that event? Did they actually, so the need for evaluation and like evaluating the impact from like a meaning making perspective is really important, and also involving folks in that like co-production, co-design partnership, right? So that it's not just, I'm not saying just, but like who are the community members, right? Like who are the researchers? Like all of these are really important questions to ask and to kind of get pushed back a little bit up against these categories that are institutionally driven, which I think you guys are all like thinking about. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking, but thank you.
No, it's very helpful. And you know, this conversation, I think in contrast to some of the earlier ones we've had, is really going down the road of pressing against policy and funding structures that exclude or invisibilize certain forms of knowledge, certain forms of community work, certain forms of collaboration. And you know, when I think of if I'm going to be asked, or if our report is going to be asked to suggest like 3, 4, 5 concrete initial tasks or steps for the Community Health Hub to try next year, let's say, when it comes into existence, what would we suggest? And I'm not saying me myself personally, but what will we cull from these conversations? I think one very important thing will be to maybe strike a group to look carefully at funding policy, at Tri-Council language, platforms, interfaces, you know, ways of representing the work we want to do, both in terms of sort of the materiality of the applications, but also the way we structure a project, the timeline, the expectations, et cetera. I mean, I think that's going to be very important, even though it feels like work that's not out in the community right away. It's more university and governmental and policy-based work, but it feels kind of urgent just from what I'm hearing here. So, but I'd love to hear more folks talk about that. And Rosa had a great comment in the chat. So,
thank you. Well, I'm really interested to learn today. I've actually retired from the federal government a year ago, and somebody from Concordia reached out to me through LinkedIn. So that's how we began this conversation. And I hear very much what Christina says about the whole funding process and ability for people with lived experience to contribute to the research spectrum. I was involved in the nascent stages of those grants at CIHR. So that was about 6-7 years ago. So really superficially, I can say that one of the programs we reached out to learn about was this yaffle.ca tool at Memorial University in Newfoundland. And essentially, in a nutshell, it's, from what I understood then, is a great matching process so that community-driven ideas, issues can potentially be matched up with researchers and experts who know about this issue and who want to collaborate with communities around such issues. So it's not specifically health related, but it definitely, some of the issues related to issues with contamination of water or other prevalent issues in communities where problem solving benefited from the use of the lived experience, and also brought together with experts and researchers within the university setting. So I thought it was such an innovative idea. And, you know, really it's a way for the community to be engaged in suggesting projects. And I thought that was a great way to try to work with communities instead of bringing a project to a community, having a community bring an idea to a university.
Sorry, but that's a really interesting model. I think we have something that is, I don't remember if we have something that's similar or if UCAM had, like we have the Office of Community Engagement here. And it's something that is existing in, I'm thinking of UCAM, le service aux communautés. At UCAM also has this relation. I really like this idea of the community being able to reach out to researchers. That's an interesting idea. I'm very interested also. How is it related to, for example, the granting structures though? Does this tool also allow for or facilitate grant? I'm looking over there, even though sorry, because your face is over there. Does it allow also or facilitate the granting process, or that is a different thing? It's mostly a matching process.
Yeah, and I don't work at Memorial or with this program, so I don't really have that kind of information, but I think it would be worth reaching out to them and getting a sense of how maybe that's enabled the initiation of new research projects and funding. And they've been around now for a few years. I mean, when I first spoke to them, it must have been around 2013, 2014. So I just looked up the website and I saw that they still have a presence. So hopefully there's a lot of knowledge and experience that they can share.
Wonderful. Thank you. We will follow up.
Yeah, it's great to have these concrete suggestions, and thank you for joining today, Rosa. And it's great to have alumni come back, Christina and Rosa and others. Anyone else like to jump in? Martin is signing off. Thank you for being here. The time is actually flying by today, but we have a few more minutes. One thing we haven't touched on yet, and maybe I'll just throw out, are the possibilities of curricular initiatives. We've been talking more about projects, and we've sort of been talking around funded research projects, but we also, I think, envision attracting doctoral students to the School of Health to work together and to work across disciplines. So these would be interdisciplinary PhD students coming to work at Concordia. And the question of coursework, curriculum, interdisciplinary projects, that's still very open. Nothing's really on paper yet that I've heard anyway, but curriculum is something that always interests me. And I've been thinking about the possibility of intensive, possibly summer intensive or other intensive courses that could be run as a way to get interdisciplinary groups of doctoral researchers together to work on problems that require, you know, multiple types of knowledge to solve them. I think it was, now I can't remember, someone mentioned, maybe it was Rosa mentioned, water quality issues in a community, just to take a very obvious and basic one. Those are often questions that relate to environment and design and urban planning and all kinds of resources. I wonder if there are thoughts, kind of structural thoughts around curriculum that anyone here might have for courses that we might try to run, or something a little bit more than courses, maybe sequences of courses or projects like field schools that we have at the university that might be embodied and engaged, but limited term community-based projects. I don't know if anyone is thinking along those lines. I see Heather has a thought.
So, well, I mean, all of this is very interesting, and I was just wondering about applied learning and as well as trying to think about like, I mean, I'm always thinking about the ways of bringing service to the community. So I just would really, it would be really great if that could be considered in terms of applied learning and how it might be able to come in. I'm not sure how it fits within the scopes and the limits of the school. And I know that some of this needs to be held within specific disciplines or specific professional programs, but something that can't happen as easily in those is the interdisciplinary work and interprofessional work with applied experiences. And so, I mean, one way that could be done would be within a sort of interdisciplinary practicum type class. And there might be other ways of it sort of being a hybrid of project design and practicum internship somehow. But that's an idea I've been working on a little bit of, as how it might connect with our Arts and Health Center. And I think that could be something interesting if there could be a collaboration with the School of Health as well.
Thanks. Other thoughts? Sorry, I'm scanning for the little raised hands. Oh, yeah, please.
Is your idea that the PhD would be, in effect, a PhD program housed in the community health, or that it would service existing PhD programs within the university? Because I'm just thinking of the English department. I mean, I joined 22 years ago. We just graduated our first PhD student last year.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? I'm just thinking, but I am thinking in terms of summer courses, thematically linked, you know, much as these roundtables have been thematically linked. So that to establish course that could be a group of courses that could be offered in the summer, perhaps, that touch on some, you know, sort of hub issues, as it were, in the hub.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So the answer is we don't know yet. It's I think it's for us to pitch ideas and suggestions, and you know, once there's a dean in place, and there'll be some decisions to make around what's the school going to do, what basket is it going to put its eggs in for the first few years. And I think it's going to be crucial for the Community Health Hub to say we want to try a limited number of things that can be radical or experimental and open in key ways. And you know, maybe there's a policy piece, maybe there's a curricular experiment, and you know, again, I don't know what else, maybe researchers coming together to apply for a grant or grants under the umbrella of the hub together. All I've heard about curricular proposals is that the Indian Huma models would be used, which is to say that there would not be faculty hired in the School of Health. So the faculty is going to, you know, will be drawn from the different departments at Concordia already, and that's how the interdisciplinary programs function, as I'm sure you all know. But that doesn't mean that there can't be, or that we can't ask for there to be credit allocations. So there could still be special courses earmarked for the School of Health, and I think there should be, and I think we should push for that. And that will give a kind of nucleus for the various, doctoral students that come to sort of be in a cohort together, to attack problems together, to to come up with projects. So we'll have to see how it turns out. It's going to need somebody to pitch something very specific that we try, I think. So.
Well, as you know, in that proposal, that early proposal, back in the dawn of time that I gave you, but our proposal was more to do with linked certificate courses. So to build a certificate more geared more to undergraduates, but sections on the creative arts in medicine, as you know, or bioethics, social and community issues, and then I think also dissemination of information, which would have been more about journalism and that sort of thing, so that these courses, again, would be fed by existing researchers, existing professors in various fields, but not at the PhD level. That not my area.
Yeah.
But it might also be something that could be considered in a sort of skeletal form as a way of seeing how do clusters work, how can courses be linked, how can professors who are existing in other departments come and teach a single course. For example, if I taught my narrative medicine course as part of the creative sort of cluster of certificate courses, which could be taken separately or built. I guess the last thing I would say is, again, my focus is always on sort of pragmatic issues. And I think there are a lot of people in the community who would also benefit from things, for example, like narrative medicine, which we were talking about, coming in outside, taking specific courses that they could then take back into their various professions or areas of expertise that I would certainly support.
There was something in the chat. I don't know what I only see like a little piece. Marta, yeah. I don't know what she said.
Oh, Marta is mentioning a project in Montana called the Montana Heritage Project. Would you say a word about that? Marta, if you're with us.
Hi, can you see me? Let me see if I can move over.
Yes.
Actually, I was trying to think about 2 or 3 different projects that, as you were talking about going into the community and assessing the needs of the community and having that outreach so that people will actually determine what they need. The Heritage Project really did that. We worked with students, we worked with colleges, and we went out and had students actually interview the people in their communities and then come back and have community meetings. Annenberg Foundation is another wonderful model that does that goes into communities to determine what the basic needs of the communities are. And then another thing that we did quite a bit of in the States was service learning. And I'm sure you've heard of service learning here, but we created a program through Portland State College, and it was a project to do place-based education and service learning. And it was, teachers were writing curriculum, but there was an instructor that helped people, from faraway places in Africa, as well as New Zealand, that actually developed service learning projects or place-based education projects, and then wrote the curriculum for the students that they were teaching in that area, whether it be college or high school. So those are just some things I was thinking about as I listened to this very interesting discussion.
Can you say a bit more about, did you say service learning?
About the service learning?
Yeah, can you just tell us a bit more about what that is?
Service learning is when you take the skills of the students and they go out into the community to actually apply those skills. For instance, riparian restoration, and water measurement. And then there are a lot of online programs that measure and collect data for that across the world. That would be an example of service learning. It might be painting murals in the town. I don't think that Montreal probably needs any more of those, but you've got a lot. But it may be, maybe something like painting murals. It may be even in some remote places. It sounds really crazy, but in the mountains in Montana, they had elk herds, and the Fish and Wildlife couldn't collect all of the data on the migration of the elk herds. And so students went out and did that. So that would be giving back to the community. There's lots of literature on service learning, and there's even a woman, let me see, Susan Abravanel, who's from Quebec, and she has since left and is working in the United States, but she's done a great deal of work in schools to develop service learning projects. It was a highly funded initiative about maybe 8 years ago in the States, and all schools and colleges implemented some form of service learning. Documentation is important, so yeah. And then I think I want to just kind of go back to the Montana Heritage Project. I think what was valuable for me on that one, I received a lot of nice awards for doing work on that and did some videos for the Department of Ed. But we did oral histories of the people that live in communities and collected those and did archives of those and different projects. I mean, it might be, farming and ranching in Montana, and you're interviewing people and then the changes of that over time. I'm sure there are so many wonderful projects that you could discover in Montreal, that have a history, and you're documenting the history of that through the oral histories that you collect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a great center for it. We have a great center for oral history and digital storytelling here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I assume. And I'm sorry to, if I'm repeating anything that you're already doing, but I'm just new to the area.
No. I think that it's important to mention the ways in which we don't necessarily put the codes like the center together with the health school, but maybe the School of Health, but maybe we should more, right? Like maybe that's something interesting. Like it makes me think, for example, about an epidemiologist who developed a life story board. He was doing epidemiology in places after disasters, and he felt that those the what is it called? Those questionnaires were cold cold, and so he developed these this way of telling your story on a board with some right, and so it's it's life story telling, it's guided life storytelling, but it allows you to speak to this thing between you rather than speaking to someone, and it's much like it allows for much more depth, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Dr. Robert Chase.
It's a great point to we seem to return to questions of oral history in these conversations, partly I think because it's a strength at Concordia and has been for some time. Stephen High and Cynthia Hammond participated in one of our earlier meetings. So that's also a question of how can a new community health component of the new school add to what we're already strong in, not attempt to duplicate it, not not water it down, obviously, but complement it well. How can it take advantage of those strengths and that research expertise that we have here, and also sort of not let's say overlap too much with what codes does so well already. Marta, thank you. I wonder, Marta, is Marta still here? Yes. Can you just tell us a bit where you're speaking to us from and what your field is? We're meeting for the first time, so.
Yeah, this is an unusual situation. I'm actually from, I was in Montana and then I'm from Oregon, but I'm serving a mission for my church through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which, with Family Search, we're really big on oral histories. But after I retired, I went to China and taught for 2 years, taught Chinese students at Nankai University. And then I'm here for 18 months serving a mission for my church. But I saw this very interesting topic that you have, and I'm so interested in issues of community health and have taught at universities in the States. So I'm very excited about what you're doing. So
Well, thanks for finding us.
Yes.
It's interesting. We want to know more about the Montana Heritage Project for sure. We are moments away from wrapping up, so thank you. This has been very lively and super informative with great suggestions. It always feels like we're scratching the surface, but maybe I'll let Lisa and Kate, if you have a few last words.
You go
for
first.
us.
Did you see that?
You just passed the buck, Lisa. That's what I love about you. No, thank you very much. As always, it's been really fantastic to hear all these ideas, and it really inspires me. Thank you.
Yeah, same here. I am very inspired. Like this idea of the opportunity, like taking this creation of something as an opportunity, and also the felt sort of constraint. It's as though the structures that we are in only allow so much, and can those be sort of creative constraints for us to sort of shift things? You know, that makes me wonder about other times and other places where we might have changed things around or moved a needle on something. There must be a history of that as well. And I was thinking, when you were talking about curriculum, I was thinking about there seems to be like I was thinking, where do the graduates of these schools, where do they come in to the community? What do they do? What do they serve? Is it something where we court, maybe? This is off the top. Like, I was thinking about people who might be already in positions that might need something that goes further, and that could also inform us about what is needed. And so I'm wondering, like, who are the people who might enjoy? I think that there's a lot of excitement about this. I think that we're, as a community, really excited about the possibilities of working on community and health. And so, yeah, we continue.
Thank you so much. Lisa, really appreciate you coming to help lead the discussion today. And Kate, thanks for coming in person into the space with us. And Anna and the team at ForceSpace, thank you guys.
We would like to thank you and
Yes.
Brock as well.
Yes.
And Brock
And
for
Brock,
furious, fast and furious note-taking. And Jody for fast and furious interpretation. Thank you.
Indeed, I'm just going to spotlight Brock's screen, and Jody and Andrea, thank you
And
so
Andrea,
much
forgive
for
me.
interpreting this session. All right, folks, we have noted down all of the comments that have come in through the chat. That's what Brock's been busy doing here behind the scenes, so we are taking note. Thank you so much for your thoughts and reflections. We do appreciate you taking the time. It does look like a semi-beautiful day out there, so we will let you go now, close up the Zoom, and invite you to the final wrap-up session. I've put the link in the chat to that event happening towards, what is it, the 19th of May, Mark?
Yes, May 19th.
Okay, perfect. So once again, we invite you back in the space or on Zoom for that. Thanks for your participation. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Ciao.